All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Growing Our Economy Advisory Committee of June 26, 2024. I would like to welcome everyone around the table and thank you for coming and call the meeting to order. I'm going to start with a moment of reflection, and we'll just take a minute to consider today's business. Thank you. I'm going to ask if there is any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof from anyone around the table. Seeing none, thank you very much. Regarding public participation, members of the public are encouraged to provide the committee with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released. Members of the public who wish to make a deputation about a specific agenda item at the meeting must register in advance with legislative services by 4 p.m. on June 25th, 2024 by contacting the deputy clerk or 519-538-1060 extension 1110. Presentations are limited to 10 minutes and deputations are limited to 5 minutes. I don't believe we have any presentations today, so we will continue with welcomes and introductions. So I'd like to take this opportunity first off to thank everyone for participating in this endeavor. I think a lot of people might know that in years past, it might have been somewhat difficult to get volunteers to step forward for advisory committees. We are so pleased that this year we had literally over 70 people for the various advisory committees that council has. So it's been really heartwarming to see the amount of interest from the community to be involved. So I guess I'll kick it off and then we'll go around the table. My name is Robert Uhrig, council member first year. I've sat on EDAC in the past to the advisory committee and am very pleased to be participating and chair this year. Personal note, I'm really excited about the potential of this committee and about our hopefully contributions to council. So thank you all for coming, and I'll turn it over to Shirley.
Thanks very much, Rob, and congratulations on being chair of the Growing Our Economy Committee. I'm Shirley Keaveney, Deputy Mayor for the municipality of Meaford. This is my third term on council. I'm delighted to be a member of this committee. I am the past chair of what was then the Economic Development Advisory Committee, and I'm also currently the chair at the county level of the Planning Economic Development Advisory Committee there. So I look very forward to the work of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I'm Ron Lampman, a recent inhabitant of Meaford for about 2 years, involved with the Meaford Pickleball Club, Christmas on the Bay treasurer, finance committee member of the Sesquicentennial celebration, board member of Main Street Meaford, and bring some experience from previous places where I lived, an economic development strategy infrastructure committee, board member of the Economic Development Corp in Fort Erie, past president of the chamber there, and a board member of an international organization, Canada-US Business Association, which was promoting businesses in both countries. Excited to be here and excited to promote Meaford, and let's get some economic development happening. Thank you, Rob.
Let's go this way first, and then we'll kind of go to Evelyn.
Evelyn Dean, and I run my own consulting business, working with primarily municipalities, and have had a special. I tried to figure out how to turn this off. Sorry. Anyway, also have had a very strong interest in economic development. I've been running with my consulting service and my framing service, I guess, here, from Meaford for over 28 years. And it's been a great community, and I am continuing to be excited as our chair and deputy mayor about seeing if we can actually kickstart economic development, because I think this community is so phenomenally blessed with great entrepreneurs and business people, and I just think many more should come and join us with this endeavor. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of years.
My name is Mike Izenga, and I have been here for 4 or 5 years. My wife and I bought a property up on Gray Road 112, a farm, and moved a good chunk of our life here as a first step. Looking forward to the day when we move all of our life here. I'm actually a class action litigator. I still work in Toronto. I have a great deal of experience in organizations like this. I also currently chair the board of War Child Canada, and I'm on the board of War Child US. I chair the board of the Raoul Wallenberg Center. These are rights-based organizations for the most part, but they also deal a lot with economic development in much more challenged places, obviously, than here. I find Meaford to be an exciting community. To drive through it is to, with your eyes open, is to see the potential, and to interact with the people is to see even more potential. So I'm very pleased to be here and look forward to making a contribution. I thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Colleen Maroney. I am the newly onboarded, as you can tell, Senior Communications Officer with the Municipality of Meaford.
Hello, I am Alex Croce. I'm the acting deputy clerk and committee coordinator, so you'll be seeing lots of me.
Good afternoon. I'm the new CAO, Kim Buckham, and I think I've had a chance to meet most of you in other forums as well, but it's also good to meet some of the new members of this committee. I think it's also just a note, myself, I also just like to bring up that, yes, I've worked in the public sector, in the private sector, but also as a consultant myself, and also own a very small B&B. Then it's kind of getting smaller because I'm getting too busy. But I think one of the things that, again, attracted me to Meaford, and that I see and have changed in our own structure here at the municipality, is that that growth, that definitely Meaford has had this energy about it. And we were just talking over lunch about that wave of that has come over in the last 3 to 4 years in Meaford, and that in addition to what will be a very, I believe, robust economy here, we also have some stewardship over the environment and social networks. So I think that, again, it's something that I don't know if entirely we'll all be considering in this particular forum, but something that from the municipality I'm very conscientious of.
No problem. Yep. I came here for the quiche today, and I ended up here at this meeting. I didn't really know that I was coming, but it is appropriate that I'm here as my new role here with the town as Director of Economic Development. So it sounds like I'm in the right space, and I think Kim knew that these meetings happen somewhat infrequently, so it was important that I just sat in and listened. So I'm basically here to listen. But in addition to that, I came to Meaford about 3 years ago. I opened up the Hills boutique accommodator and bike shop, which is now has a boutique coffee shop in the ground floor called Savvy Co. from Flesherton. So it's been my great honor and privilege to be part of Meaford. I've been inspired to join the community so much as I've joined the town on the municipal level. So it's a great pleasure, and I'm honored to be part of this group. So thank you.
I'm Valerie Manning, the Director of Financial Services and Treasurer, and I'm just happy to be here.
Always count on Val for a very long intro. Thank you again, everyone, and particularly thank you, Holly and Eric, for your joining the team. And we're really excited to kind of have communications and economic development, which are two things I think we've always talked about with EDAC in the past, about as being a couple of things that we felt were somewhat lacking in our suits. So I really welcome both of you, and I know there will be an awful lot of onboarding to get up to speed, but we're confident we'll have a good future. We do want to get into things, and I promised, when Alex and I and Kim met originally, I promised we would try and keep the dry stuff to a minimum. So we do have to go through some basics of some reference, the terms of reference and the roles and responsibility. So I will turn that over. Point 6, obviously there on your agenda, is the being a bylaw to establish our advisory committee. So Alex, do you want to kind of take the floor on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I am very mindful of our discussion that we had at the agenda review meeting. I actually am not going to go into the slideshows in detail because I recognize that we're short on time. And I would hope that at some point you folks could take a look at this section, use it sort of like a reference section. Obviously, we have the terms of reference that was adopted and passed by council. So that sort of gives us a little bit of a guideline as to what this committee's mandate is. Then you also have your other typical stuff, definitions, procedural things of that nature. I also included the procedural bylaw on the agenda. Again, use this as a reference. We're not going to sit here and go through the procedural bylaw by any means. But it's a great resource for if something comes up, even myself, I use this document. If something comes up in a meeting, a term is used such as quorum or, you know, the role of the chair or something like that, you can quickly search this document and it'll go into detail as to where the procedure and the process has come from. You know, why do we say through the chair when we speak? Why do we turn the microphone on? Just little things like that. They're written somewhere, and that's sort of why we created this section on the agenda for the first committee meeting. Same thing goes into the committee orientation and the committee code of conduct PowerPoints. I would hope that you've kind of gone through them, you've read them, and if you have any questions about anything in particular, now would definitely be the time, or you can shoot me an email afterwards. Really, it just comes down to the involving the public, being transparent. The code of conduct touches on just behavior that's quote unquote acceptable. It also talks about forms that can be used in terms of the formal complaint process. If you're curious about disclosing pecuniary interest, all of that is kind of covered in there. And the committee orientation PowerPoint also references municipal legislation. So of course we have our legislation, then we have our procedural bylaw, then we have our code of conduct. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. I will say what would be very relevant to the advisory committees for the municipality of Meaford. There's a lot of value in our committees because we use it as a forum for public participation. Council wants to hear from our public. This is an awesome way to not only hear from our committee members, but all of our meetings are live streamed, so members of the public can watch, members of the public can attend, they can give presentations, they can send us emails, correspondence. This is just another way to keep our channels open other than just what we have for our council meetings. I will say as well, we've established our committees. This one has existed in the past, as the chair has referenced. But we have integrated some new procedures for advisory committees. That includes our agenda meeting. So 2 weeks prior to the meeting, we have a meeting with the chair, myself, and the staff resource, and the chair is able to bring a member from the committee as well, so that you are included in the agenda process. And then the week after that, the agenda is of course published, so you can always rely on having an agenda 1 week in advance of the meeting. That's how we get the material to you in advance, but again, also including the public on that, so they're able to be in the loop with regards to any decision making. And then we have the meeting, of course, where discussion is welcome. We're going to have a lot of discussion today. That's why I'm trying to be brief, and I don't know that I'm doing a good job. I'm sorry. But, you know, there's no quote unquote stupid questions. You know, if people disagree, that's great. Obviously, code of conduct, we're going to be respectful of each other, but we're here to chat about things. I think today's meeting too, we're going to keep it sort of broad, and we're going to all kind of work together on really making our work meaningful. And then, after the meeting, you can expect to see minutes published as our sort of record keeping of kind of the discussion that was had at the meeting, any decisions that were made by the committee, or recommendations that have been passed, etc. So I hope that was somewhat informational and helpful. Is there any questions about any of the resource material in A, B, and C? Perfect. So I believe our CAO wanted to talk about item D, the roles and responsibilities between, just sort of the dynamic between advisory committees and the municipality, sort of what that looks like.
And I think that just actually goes to, in the past, we haven't necessarily had a director of economic development. So this is, again, a new frontier in a way. So I thought that that in addition to, in the past, we've also, I think the committee, and this is, I wasn't around, but this is again, information that was shared with me, that the committee would have recommendations or things, and it needed to be delivered through the arm of the municipality. And I think that is the way that we are seeing things going forward as well. So I think we see ourselves working very closely with this group. And clearly, just even in our introductions, everyone's aligned, I think, to some degree to see implementation of economic development and growth. It's now, what are the priorities and what are the things and how do we define it? So just as we go forward, I just wanted to lay out that certainly it's my intention and Eric's intention to be right at the gates, if you will, with you in the planning and also in how we can deliver that. And that might include us taking it and bringing it to council. And then some of that the county might be doing or, Eric might be doing all on their own with their own work. So it's just good to make sure that we're all aligned. And when there are times, because I think that will be coming, where this group will want to have a work package. Like, I'm using really broad terms, but there might be a work package that you'd like done. And I think that would be the opportunity for us to make that recommendation to council. And then, of course, council, encourages and or endorses and approves that. And again, we can take that into our implementation of the operations of the municipality. So just wanted to start there, but open to also hearing how, that could look different, or if there was any other expectations from this advisory group or thoughts from the chairs.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that, Alex. That was perfectly succinct compared. I know some of the other advisory committees have had very lengthy training sessions, and I fully appreciate and understand it. I think knowing a number of our members here have all sat on boards before, I think we all fairly have a reasonable understanding of our responsibility. So I was hoping we could keep that short. The other thing that, and the main reason for that is obviously our scenario is the way it's set up. We have 6 meetings that are throughout a year at an hour and a half. We literally have like 9 hours in a year to try and hatch economic development for Meaford. That's not a lot of time. So what I think what will come out of this, as we discussed in the agenda setting meeting as well, is, I'm sorry to do this, but there will be homework, because realistically, what we will be able to accomplish in the room will be compacted. Hopefully, we can take away a lot of this information and then come back and discuss these at length with staff and maybe hopefully come up with some recommendations. So to that point, one other thing I will add. So at each agenda setting meeting, I have the opportunity, I sit with Alex and Kim, and we also have the opportunity to bring one other member from the committee to the meeting so that we can discuss what we would like to bring to that next meeting. So at each of you, I would look forward to having the opportunity of you joining me with the agenda setting meeting so we can kind of set what our goals are. So where we started on this, let's take it right back to the roots. I mean, we all have a broad spectrum of what economic development is, I'm sure. Ron, if you have a question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we now have a Director of Economic Development, and I'm wondering whether it would be beneficial to have that person at these meetings when they're setting the agendas.
I am certainly hoping that's going to be the case. The hint has been securely dropped. So taking it back to the bones, we said, one thing I think we have to agree on, and I think this has mainly been something in the past that has been not contentious, but it's been up for discussion, is literally what is economic development? Hence, we had this conversation and these four definitions were kind of put forth. I'm again hoping that you've all had a chance to look at the agenda. But we thought just right off the top, why don't we literally agree on a definition of what we think it is and what we're trying to achieve so that it's hard to have a goal if you don't have a map. So I think I would throw this open to any questions or comments on the four definitions that were offered in the agenda. Sure. I will read them. So let's go with, they're up there now, but I'm gonna read them just for the public, and for public as well. This will be an exercise of information. So the four definitions presented were: one, economic development is initiatives and actions taken to improve and strengthen the local economy. It involves efforts to attract businesses, create job opportunities, enhance infrastructure, and stimulate economic growth within the community. Two, economic development are the activities that support local business owners and help grow the local economy. Three, economic development. It's the activities and vision for a sustainable and strong economy built on social and environmental stewardship. And four, economic development is programs, policies, or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community. I don't think we can argue that any of those are wrong. I just think we need truly to come up with our own definition of what we're trying to achieve through these statements, whatever statement we agree on. Now, any comments or questions?
So being the new person here,
Sure.
through you, Mr. Chairman, I would simply observe that it probably makes sense to embrace these kinds of goals, but have some priorities too, because in fact, this is a lot.
Yeah.
And it's something I think every one of us, each of these points, we ought to get behind. And when I read through them, I thought, something, this is the right mix of, making people feel safe who have businesses here now, encouraging people who might be interested in attracting new business here, making sure that people are comfortable that we have a socially responsible approach to these things, but there does come a point at which you can embrace all of these things and say, but here's what we really want to do in the next little while. We want to X, grow, bring new businesses, whatever it is, right? So that would be the only suggestion I would make with what looks to me to be a comprehensive, robust, very thoughtful. As a result of a good process, you've come up with something really great, but maybe prioritizing would help us actually get things done,
Absolutely. Before I comment on that, I'm going to open it up to other comments. Shirley?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your comments, Michael. And I think this is well written. I mean, realistically, economic development is everything. As soon as you step out the door, it's just so inclusive of absolutely everything that we do. But to your point about setting priorities and how do we achieve the definitions that have been set out here for us, Evelyn, you'll want to chime in on this. The prior Economic Development Advisory Committee had created a suggested work plan that might move forward into this committee should the members of this committee and staff agree. And I'm just wondering if some of those recommendations might find their way into this process as we go about trying to meet some of the expectations that have been set out for us here. And Evelyn, I'll turn it over to you because you were a huge part of composing that very comprehensive work plan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, to me, economic development, as you said, is a little bit of all of that. And one of the elements when there was a lot of discussion was, I think, addressing what Mike was saying, is that if you don't establish some priorities, you're never going to achieve anything. And I think so that, and the question is, who sets the priorities? And obviously, council at the end of the day. But where does that input come from? And I think the discussions, there were a lot of discussions about some mechanism to get community input. And that can be a very targeted approach. It can be a more open approach, but there were a bunch of activities and the recommendations that were back in, I guess the report was 2020. From the Economic Development Strategic Plan. So that's now 4 years later. And some of those things have been slightly addressed, and some of the items, there's been nothing done at all. And we definitely haven't established a community-based way of trying to get those priorities. So I was quite excited to see you at the table. I was looking to, hadn't seen your face before. So actually to have an economic development director is music to my ears. Because we're just volunteers, we're committee members. You know, yes, we are some of the voices in the community, but again, out of that original set of input we got from the community was, well, you know, come out and talk to us. That hasn't really been done. And it's not an appropriate role, although we had lots of offers within various versions of this committee prior to today to go out and do so, but it was really more appropriate, you know, from a municipal staff perspective to develop the mechanisms by which some of those things, and I think people on this committee can offer on how to enhance it and engage with that. So I think the recommendations, it's a good starting point, but I think we need a way to update what's in there, and doing that through some kind of meaningful input. I think there are some other inputs that came out of the last official plan that was put together. But again, we never ended up going through an exercise of community priorities. And that would assist, I think, in firming up a more strategic approach on, we can't do everything, but what would give most meaning here in the community from our various groups, everything from groups that are involved with tourism, those that are involved in our agriculture community, as well as local businesses and even all our businesses that are run from home, which is, you know, an example where I'm at, but there's lots of them. So how do we get this kind of input?
If I may, this is the first time I've seen this document, and I'm borrowing Val's laptop to read this information. So you have to forgive me, but I assume that this will be my responsibility to listen to, you know, to you and to the council and to the citizens, and come back with the priority list, and then start the process of growing the economy. So yeah, just give me a little bit of time. I'm just digesting the quiche. Yeah, no,
So 4 o'clock?
exactly. But it is as the employee in this area, it is my responsibility to hear you know, the concerns of this group, and to devise a strategy to implement things. So just with some time, I am going to have to take some time, you know, to listen.
Mhm.
And that's my first role, and starting with this document and Val's computer and other, yeah, exactly. But that is my role. So I look forward to it.
Oh, I'm looking forward that there's a staff member actually assigned that role to do
I
so.
understand.
So that is kind of
Well, you can
exciting.
thank him for literally lassoing me. and
Yeah,
Pulling me
I
in.
have a feeling she has very interesting techniques.
She does. She fooled me, so it's effective so far.
Thank you, Evelyn. Ron, before I chime in, I just wonder if you wanted to say a few words.
Yes, with respect to the development strategy plan, which is a bit dated now, I agree with you, Eleanor. It's 2020. But I think there are a lot of initiatives in there that we can utilize going forward and create activity within the community. We also should look to some of the groups in the community. We have a Meaford Downtown group right now that has developed a very extensive website and business listing, which might be a good source. I think these sources are great because there was a consultative approach in developing this strategic plan, and we need to talk to people again. In addition, you have Main Street Meaford, which is another group that has been endorsed by council to do some economic development. And we also should look to the agrarian community, which is a very large part of Meaford. So I think if we get out in the community again and develop the consultative approach, we can develop and get forward very quickly using the strategic plan that was developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, I'm glad, Evelyn, that you brought up the economic development strategic plan, because that is, it's for those at the table who weren't aware. So in 2019, there was a concerted effort, brought in consultants. We had a lot of public participation, organization participation, municipal participation. It was all come together to try and once again formulate some kind of strategy about economic development. I think at the time it was very well intentioned. The report actually came out in June 20, and it's very ironic that its end date is June 24. So this is actually very timely that we finally got this growing our economy committee up and running. There, to your point, Ron, there were a lot of good things that did come out of this. What obviously this didn't take into consideration was pre-COVID, and that changed a lot of things for Meaford. So obviously there are some very great variations from that initial report. Having said that, it makes me wonder if so, and to Eric's point, and this you will have to kind of live and breathe with this document, but on page 101 of your agenda is literally the score, the strengths, challenges, opportunities, aspirations, and results report. And that at the time was kind of based on opinions of people and professionals and businesses that this was our direction forward. I would think that this committee, one of our tasks could be to update this to present time, because this framework is already there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some of it's still relevant, but we could certainly update it to make sure that we have the most relevant information and new directionality. So that's just an opinion I would put forward to the group as to whether or not we would like to tackle that. As Shirley said, the work plan that was done before, some great things in there. We've always talked about a business directory for the whole municipality, which I think would be of great value. As we know, data is so important to all of our processes and reaching everyone fairly in the community. So those are a couple of things that, you know, we would hope to focus on right off the top. But again, that's my thought. So I just wanted to put that out there, whether SCORE was something that we could look at as a function of the committee to try and update to make sure that we're relevant and help Eric and his efforts to try and kind of get the strategic plan up to speed and up to timely fashion. Sure.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and I would totally agree. I think there are certainly components of the plan that are still relevant. A great deal of work, as everyone will recall, was put into the creation of this plan. So I think, overarchingly, it's still a valuable document, but yes, it should be revisited and updated. And I think it's also an opportunity for us in that process, as we've talked about at many prior meetings, is to do a visioning and to understand really what it is that this community wants Meaford to look like and to become. So we could talk about that potential. And I also think there's, as it's talked about and referenced on many occasions within the plan, to involve Grey County and the really excellent Economic Development Department at that level. The county has recently made an investment in Environics, in pulling data from the last census that they are using to put together community profiles, both for the county and for each of the lower tiers. So I think as well, only if the committee and staff agree, that we might participate in a community profile for Meaford. The one that we have is very, very outdated. And I think there's an opportunity for us to consider this, because it's valuable not just for tourism, but for the attraction of businesses and potentially the attraction of doctors and medical professionals as well. So I'll just put that out there for comment.
My comment might be a little broader, but that was very helpful, because when I spent time in the strategic plan, I thought this is my way to learn this business, to know what's going on. Strikes me that Eric and I, as kind of new, might become pals, because one of the things we could do is go through this, and I suspect there will be people on this committee who will be able to say that's done, that's partially done, that we don't need to do anymore, and that might, for some of us, kind of get us up to speed. It is obviously the result of significant consultation and real thoughtful work and so forth. Different time would lay the foundation for what the next steps are. So I kind of think this is an extremely valuable thing, but it's obviously 4 years old.
Evelyn?
The other piece after that report was done, I think what the challenge was, because many of the items are really, I think when Eric goes through it, have kind of, it's instrumental that there is some staff support to get it started. And I think the role of those that were assisting with economic development over the last 4 years, it wasn't a dedicated resource. And I think there was a lack of resources to be able to put to it. At least that's what we were informed. So, so it'll be very helpful, I think, for your assessment on what you feel of the pieces that may not be done would be still appropriate at this point. So I think that would be as important for this committee to hear, because will know that, get to know that data more intimately. And
Yeah, what the available resources and what our capabilities are, I'm a fairly realistic.
that's exactly, but we fundamentally had no resources really. If you look at it, there was very minimal resources that were available at the time as we went through COVID and all sorts of other challenges.
So there will be, we can dream and have the wish list, but then there's going to be what can we actually do?
And I think that
marrying those two will be very important for all of us.
Yeah, so
and
from a
then
staff
delivery of that
perspective
message.
and I think from those of us sitting in the community, in the business area,
right,
to be able to provide input.
And then to give some understanding why we have those limitations and make that, publicly known, so that there isn't the frustration that builds within the community. So that's an important part of all this.
Right.
And that's over to Holly for that. Communications, no, just kidding, but on day one for her too. Yeah, so I mean, it's striking that balance with what we can do.
I know, having been part of discussions with lots of people back then in 2019, I think a lot of people in the community are aware there's not an unlimited level of resourcing. So I think that need to come up with some starting point for priority and then building maybe towards a community set of priorities.
And I would think that means utilizing us as a resource, because you obviously are drinking through the fire hose, as we always say. So again, having people that have taken place or participated in this in the past could bring some dimension of opinion or transparency in that regard. So please, yeah, feel free to utilize us as well in your learning exercises. Ron brought up a very good point. So I think one of the things we have to do here in terms of, and Shirley is as well. So in terms of what this committee is able to do is not only have this think tank scenario and then work with staff to kind of formulate this process, but there are so many other tools or resources that are available to us. So Grey County, again, has a very well-respected and a very successful economic development plan, department, strategy, and we will lean heavily on that. But we have the opportunity with this group to have Grey County. Pump storage project is obviously going to have a major impact on this community if it does indeed go forward. Whether we're dealing with organizations like Main Street, the Chamber of Commerce, or the military base, or the other advisory committees. The way that this has been structured now, all the advisory committees, they're broader spectrum, so they all deal with various things, and there will be overlap between what we're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to accomplish. So we may want people sitting in and giving presentations from other organizations and committees to us so that we can discuss these things and they can be taken back, and that we're working in partnerships with groups and not in the dark alone. So I think that's something else we have to really figure out is, again, when it comes to, and you're right, it's going to come back to priorities. That's a heady list of people that we can hear and talk to and listen to. How do we prioritize that? Where do we want to start? So again, we've got a very big puzzle in front of us and only very few pieces in place. So we're going to have to figure out what that's going to be. Shirley.
And thank you for those comments, Mr. Chair, because that also leads me to thinking that perhaps we'll want to set some goals, because it's wonderful to have all of these conversations, but what measurable outcomes do we want to achieve in the time frame that we have in front of us? But I think coming back to the plan, for me, what has changed the most, and you'll see it written right into the plan, was a concern from a number of people at the time that there was what we felt was a can't-do attitude in Meaford. And wow, how that has changed. And in the last very short time, I'm now feeling very strongly, I'm so encouraged that I believe we now have both a council and a committee structure and a staff who believe that we can do things and that we will do things and that we will work together and we will make Meaford greater than it's ever been. And I think that energy and that momentum is felt at all levels in the community, within the organizations that you mentioned, within the service clubs, and by our residents and by all of us. So I think it's just a really exciting time. And with Eric now on board to support us and to guide us and to lead us through these processes, that Meaford, I don't want to use the term again, will be on the map, because it already is. People recognize Meaford. We all feel the same thing wherever we go. And people say, where are you from? People now know Meaford, and they know Meaford in a positive way. And I think that's really incredible. And so we're just going to build on that, and we're going to have some fun doing it.
Ron?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you look at the economic development strategy plan, there is a myriad of items in there. I think what we should do is focus on the items that we think are achievable. And anytime you get to those achievements, you get a win, and everyone is happy with a win. And I'm certain our community would be happy with it. So I think the first thing we should do with respect to this is establish priorities that are achievable, and then go out and consult with the community to get their buy-in on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. I'm going to keep this fairly fluid because 7.7 on the agenda is economic development. 0.8 is actually the municipality of Meaford's council priorities. And there's going to be huge overlap there. So I think we should keep this fluid and discuss both of them. Because when you talk about that, Ron, and to your point, this also harkens back to what actual council priorities are. Some of the council priorities are specifically designed to be economic development initiatives. So in conjunction with the strategic plan, you're right, we need to balance between the priorities and the strategic plan, figure out what we can do that is realistic, that we are able to achieve in a short time frame that we have. But to Shirley's point as well, is to set goals. So I don't know, I will throw it open to the committee. Do you want to look at the priorities, the strategic, the council priorities, to determine whether or not you want to start with that to see if there's something there that fits? Or do you want to start with the strategic plan and the score analysis to determine whether we take that direction and fit that into the priorities? Because there's two different ways we can go there, but they do really, at the end of the day, get us to the same goal. It's just how we're getting there.
I think I would start at looking at what are the key elements we have in place as a information base, as a solid base to start from. You know, it's kind of like economic development 101.
Yes.
And you need to have certain things in place like information, and I think some of that we've done well and some of it we still need to get. So those foundational pieces to me are most important because it's what everything else gets built on. So as we do different projects or do different things, it's making the assumption we have all this basis of good information. Like, for example, a listing of all the businesses. You know, this is something we all have heard for the last quite a few years, was just what's the best process to just do that? It hasn't fully been done. So there's a whole lot of those things that as we develop the longer goals for at least till the end of council, you know, what are some of those things? And maybe that can come sooner than later from staff to say, well, we've got this in place. These are the foundational pieces in putting forward a good longer term economic development strategy or growth strategy. And these are the only things we need. And those I see as priorities. And then if there's something that's really kind of already there, you know, it's nice to take sometimes a little bit of low hanging fruit and get a few wins. And while we work our way to that longer plan, which hopefully we'll set as our goal, and you know, the beginning of next year, we might have that whole plan together because it's got to be budgeted for as well, and all that kind of thing. So we would have a few meetings to begin to pull that together, but pick some things in between to work on so that by the end of this year, we can say, well, we put some foundation pieces together.
Shirley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and totally agree, 11. Evelyn, I'm sorry. A couple of things. One priority that I'd like to see us undertake, which we did talk about in our prior committee, but we didn't have the staff and neither did the county at the time, was the business gap analysis. And we did talked a little bit about this at lunchtime to help Eric understand what this is all about. But I think that will give us an understanding of the businesses we have, at least in our downtown. And then potentially we could take on the mission, if everyone agreed, to expand that into our rural areas and add to that business listing. So I think that's something I'd like us to consider. And as we talk about the priorities as they're laid out here with council's priorities. If we look at strengthening our community, that's the downtown public realm on reestablishing Market Square and so on. So think I'm just a little bit concerned about any duplication or overlap that may happen, because if we look at hours growing our economy, it's short-term accommodation. And I think Kim is well on her way to bringing a plan to council in regards to that. And the TC Energy peer review and community benefit negotiation. And we do have our PSAC committee. So it's undertaking some of that work. So I'm looking at this and thinking that we're a little bit wide open almost in terms of setting priorities for this committee. So it's really interesting that we're having this discussion and have the ability to go back to the definitions of economic development and pull from there some things that we'd like to focus on, because I think for most people, they see economic development as bringing business, but it's so much more than that. And there's so much opportunity ahead of us. So I just think we've got a big task here in terms of deciding what those specific priorities are going to be, as Ron says, that are achievable and that we can accomplish within the timeframe of this term of council.
Okay. Building on that, and I agree as well, 100%. The only issue I see with the information gathering aspect is time. So you're right, that is going to be an exercise that Eric is not going to pull out this afternoon. I'm pretty sure. And so that is going to be information gathering, even if we're incorporating Grey County. So I agree with you, and we do need absolutely to do that. But that is literally probably months of information gathering. What can we do in the immediacy? What can we kind of get our teeth wet on, like literally for the next agenda? Because by that time, in that month and a half, we won't have all the business directory together. We won't have some of this stuff in place, and we can't be sitting here spinning our wheels once again, wondering why this committee is not doing anything. So to Ron's point, what are some goals that are attainable in short term that we should be looking at that are achievable short term as well as long term goals? Kim.
May I ask just a question? And it's just because of the way you framed that last question too to the group. I guess I was assuming that most, if not everything, would be delivered and executed at the municipality level. But am I getting the sense that there might be, aside from advisory components, that there are things that this group would like to do in more of the implementation? Or is this sorry, just because I kind of heard a bit of that. So I'm curious if that is also the nature and the scope that you want to get into.
And again, that's going to be an opinion of the committee. Our original discussion was, and again, I used the word homework and I use that loosely, but at the end of the day, what we used to do with EDAC committees is we used to take information from the staff and kind of walk away and say, well, we'll wait and see what happens next meeting, and we would take it in again. But there wasn't really a lot of kind of impetus put on the staff members or the committee members to actually maybe go out and garner your own information and bring it back to the table and share it with staff. Once again, there are some very smart minds around this table. And if everybody is utilizing their talents to try and gather information, hopefully identifying that so that we're not getting duplication of effort. But if we are kind of all striving towards the same goal, then we're working together towards the same means. Does that make sense? And again, having said that, we need to define that. We're already at 1:56. We have to be out of here by 2:30 today because there is another advisory committee following at 3. So we literally, we're already down to a half hour after actually some very good conversation. And I think some reasonable identification of what we want to do. Is just now, what's that look like? Because we do have staff as a resource, and we're going to be relying heavily on them to task them with whatever information we might need or ask for or want to make decisions, to make recommendations. But I'd much rather in between meetings be doing something as well to further that conversation. Shirley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think if I follow what you were saying, you're looking for some outcomes from today that will lead us into the agenda for the next committee meeting.
Correct.
So I have 2 suggestions, I guess. One would be to allow Eric the opportunity to scour this economic development strategy as it exists and to come back to this committee with his recommendations for what we could do to update this particular plan so that it is more relevant to us, particularly in the area of the work plan side of it. And I'd also suggest for our next agenda that we invite Savannah Myers from Grey County, perhaps to attend or to speak to us virtually to talk us through the business gap analysis and the profile element that she's undertaking for us as lower tiers, and to get potentially an understanding of how the county is active in promoting Meaford. I just don't want us, with the little bit of time that we have, to duplicate any efforts that are already being undertaken. So those would be my two suggestions for our next agenda.
Thoughts, comments?
Mr. Chair, I like the fact that that's very specific.
Yes.
And so again, as a new person, I would endorse something like that. It does sound to me like we're talking about a couple of things. We're talking about some very granular things that we can do right away, out of the strategic plan. But we're also talking about things that might actually require some resources, and we might need to know what else is available. We've talked about the pump storage committee, right? That undoubtedly is going to be a little bit of an elephant in the room in many conversations, because there is a negotiation that will be going on with, you know, with respect to community benefits, and there, whatever you think about that. And I am a neutral person on the issue, despite the fact that TC is actually my neighbor, like right next to me. It's all fine, but realistically, there will be an injection of resources that will be different from what we've seen in the past. So we need to at least know what is being talked about here. And it strikes me that one of the things I realized in this conversation is I need to know a little more about the other advisory committees, because there will be overlaps and there will be ways in which we will be making suggestions to council that others may be as well. And it doesn't make any sense for us to be duplicating effort or being inconsistent in messages we deliver because we're considering different things. But I very much like the idea of having early couple of very specific things. You know, the business gap analysis is a very concrete, achievable thing. And it feels to me like there's a resource that we can reach out to, get Grey County to talk to us, and you have a specific person. That's an encouraging thing. By the same token, Ron's comments about these granular things that we can look through and just make some decisions about, this has either been done or can be done. You know, I think probably with somebody like Evelyn here, we'll be able to make those determinations ourselves a bit. Sorry about that.
In your spare time.
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to add to the piece about the business gap analysis. There will be opportunity for us to participate as a committee, because businesses will need to be approached. And I'm not sure what it will look like if there's a little bit of a survey or some questions or something of that nature. So we can actively get out and talk to businesses. But just another thought, and I'm really sorry, Eric, I know you've had like 4 hours on the job now. No, should have brought some dessert. And I'm not sure at this point, so I'll look for Kim to nod, but whether you'll be attending Main Street meetings or, you know, the Chamber of Commerce or any of those other groups that are gathered and are active in our downtown. And I know you're connected with the Wave through your own business. So I'm wondering if you might consider bringing some information from those groups to this committee, again, so that we have some knowledge of what they're doing, and again, to avoid any duplication, in particular with Main Streets, because I know they're going to be talking about business attraction as well. Ron will know he's on that committee, but just so that we can complement each other if that is a possibility. And perhaps I'll look to you, Ron, to add to that, since you're a member of Main Streets.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's what I was going to do. We're going to volunteer, Eric, anytime you would like to contact me, we can sit down and talk a little bit. And I can be a resource with respect of Main Street, also the 150 committee and some of the other activities in town. So I'd be glad to meet with you any time at your convenience.
Yeah, thank you. With our 30+1 day experience here in the town, we will pull all of this together and come back with a strategy to how we, build the agenda for the next meeting and, what I'm attending, what I'm not. And so Kim and I will work together. I don't know, I honestly don't know Kim's style. And so we need to just settle into each other a little bit. And from there, we can make some recommendations to this group and lead as opposed to,
Sure.
And just to add to that, I think what you'll see, because this is almost, again, it's lovely, it's slightly overwhelming, only I think because of how much people have wanted this role and roles in our community. And so there are, we were at a debrief yesterday with community groups who are also doing amazing work that also inspires and or has spin off to economic development. So there has, in the absence of, I'll say, big open arms around this from the municipality perspective, we're now getting there. But yes, on day one, I don't even know that Eric would call this day one. I gave him lunch. And so, but I think I have done a lot of thinking about this, and Eric has done, just a little bit from the seat of the municipality. So I do think we can certainly, if the interest is there, which I think there is clearly, to come back, we can report out on the groups that we've chatted with, and that will be a combination. But also note that we also have a director of community services too. And like I say, there's a number of initiatives happening at that level. And although they're not for profit, they have a lot of really interesting and dynamic events that they bring forward that also creates, like I say, economic development and spinoffs. So I think there wouldn't be any harm in us bringing that list and us bringing forward kind of how we're going to tackle the multiple groups, because I do hear, and even from them, from all the groups that I've met with, well, who's doing it all together, who's bringing us. And I do think that is a piece that the municipality has the contacts in all of those areas. So that is something you'll see a stronger and stronger role coming from the municipality in that space. So not just Eric. Don't feel that pressure. That is duties as assigned. But certainly it's going to be a combination of the team.
Well, I think you're selling yourself short with Holly. You've got 37 days in. So I think really, so you've got it well covered. One thing I think is really important to mention here, and I know that we all know it and we think it and we live it, but I think when we're talking about this, because we talk about main streets and we talk about a lot of things in Meaford, the town, we have to make absolutely clear that this is Meaford, the municipality, and that the rural component is a big part of our conversation and our goal to make sure that we're conducting economic development and resource for the whole municipality, because ag is still a huge component of our fabric, and we need to make sure that we are addressing that faction as well. So just want to make sure that's also at forefront of everyone's mind. Evelyn, did you have a comment? It looked like you were thinking something. Are you going to push the button?
I think we're all coming at this very optimistically. Everybody wanting to get their feet wet, which is really great. And I think to do a bit of learning for the committee as a whole will be good in terms of updating everybody to what's kind of happening. But at the end of the day, we still need to pick a few things so that, I think as you so clearly said, we want some sense that we were able to accomplish something in this year. So I don't think it'll take a lot. I think, as Ron said, there is some things in here that can be taken, and maybe some examples gotten from the various groups on what would that look like. So it's taking advantage of, you know, as you're meeting all the new businesses, just kind of, you know, it's the normal way of getting involved. What are your key issues? What's the thing that's driving you the craziest now? That if we could just get rid of that one thing, and I don't think it'll be, I mean, yes, there'll be lots of things, but I have a feeling there's a few of those that will come up, and I think those are the things that can come forth. And I guess the question is that just a staff role? Is that something that members on the committee can participate in? There's been various definitions on that role for committee members. So I think even that is an issue. Is that, you know, or do we want to make use? I mean, you've just, what's the name of the survey tool that you're? No, the
Flash votes.
yes, the flash vote. So there, you know, we have some interesting tools now that very quickly you could get feedback and it would build a little bit of momentum for what I call some of the few low-hanging fruit items that maybe we could try while we're building them.
May I just ask, and maybe that in itself is, you know, because of the cadence of these meetings, do rest assured, you know, we will start working on those pieces, and it won't be until we come back to, like, I think, maybe again, looking at this as the advice is get some low hanging fruit, Kim. I hear that, and we can do some of that. And I think that's where we can do some sharing of what we've done at the next meeting, sharing of who we've seen. But maybe again, this advisory group is if, you know, again, around the definition, it might be to share, hey, have you looked here? Do you know that? Like when we do that type of update, and or, you know, to reach out individually throughout the times that we might not be getting together to say, oh, it sounded like you had a specific, you know, interest in working through this part. Would that make sense? So because of, again, the distance and time, I think absolutely, I don't know that you guys have to create the first list of the quick wins and or the strategy and the gaps and those types of things. You can leave that with us in hearing that that's also what you need. It is kind of fundamental. So I think that's the stuff we need too.
I think the reason for that is people have been waiting a long time for anything. And so if we can.
That's also how I sold it too.
And that for me, I think is as important because there was a huge amount of, actually a lot of positive energy, I think, as the deputy mayor said, back in 2019 amongst all the various groups. I mean, and, you know, but there was that skepticism. And of course, then COVID hit and, you know, it took the air out of everybody's tires. But I think we're back at that same point again. And even back then, I was looking at, well, here are some things that had been brought up, you know, that were urgent, and they were what I call low-hanging fruit items that with just a little bit of coordinated effort and, you know, gathering the parties together could get resolved, and suddenly you get really positive momentum going, because getting a few of those positive things is what sells itself for others who are looking to us as a community to expand their businesses, to bring their business, not only to move here, but it's all of that together. It's not, do we have how many problems? It's like, well, gee, you know, I just read it. They identified this and this is the strategy they took, and that sells a lot better than anything of like inaction. And I'd say probably we've been a good example of inaction for multiple reasons. It doesn't matter to go, but if we can begin to show some level of action, I think it'll do a lot for all of those that are working on all the various projects as well, because it's not just this committee, it's as you said, there's a lot of other community groups that are really working hard. I mean, I've never seen so much energy by new businesses that have come in here and, you know, developed events now, you know, that weren't happening 3 years ago.
Thank you, Evelyn. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the economic development strategy plan and looking at the score, I don't like to assign homework to
I already did.
any of our committee members. But I think it's a good opportunity to go through that and focus on what might be applicable to each of us and highlight those items. And then we could go through and say, this is achievable, this is achievable, this is achievable. I look at the challenges, and one of the items was municipal culture, leadership, and staff perceived a can-do mentality and a risk adverse. Municipalities perceived as not being business friendly. No municipal staff are responsible exclusively for economic development. I look at those achievements in place, and that gives me confidence that we are going to be able to accomplish some things. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron, and that's absolutely right. And I think the score is again a great place to start because there is already a basis of a roadmap. The other thing I would say, Kim, you made a good point about the resource aspect of the staff being able to bring that to the next meeting and then talk about what's formulated. Can I? And I'm not sure about the procedural correctness of this, but as your department, Eric, is gathering information. At the end of the day, information is king. And what scares me a little bit about is what happens even in council meetings is you end up getting a half-hour presentation and you get a 20-minute communication or something else, and you literally get 15 minutes to talk about something. So at the end of the day, if there are resource materials that are being gathered, hopefully that can be shared with all members of the committee in advance. Yes, we still want to review them, but being fed that fire hose at the meeting is not as helpful as having all the information. And I know, again, we keep referring that you're going to have a lot of information that you're going to be gleaning as well. You don't even know what we know. We don't know what you know. So shared resources may be redundant to some of us, but it's also a refresher. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And the more data and information we have, the more prepared we are at the next meeting to actually have reasonable and intelligent conversations, hopefully to push things forward. So I just ask that if staff has germane materials, that they share them with the committee so that if they are relevant to our conversations, that we can study them in advance. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair, that makes a lot of sense. But the other thing that I think has happened in this meeting is that we've actually had a discussion about priorities. And we've, I think, decided that rather than, for now, at least short term, rather than think about the highfalutin next big thing that we're going to do, our short-term priorities are going to be to do the things that we can do quickly, whether we call them what's achievable, take the early wins, or whatever. And I think that probably means that what this committee has done informally is direct staff to focus on early achievements, right? So that's what, as I understand this conversation, that's what we did.
Yes. Everyone in agreement? Surely.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I absolutely agree. And just a thought before I lose it, as we talk about economic development and a portion of that being attracting businesses and recognizing that both Rob and I are past presidents of the Chamber of Commerce in Meaford and Ron elsewhere, and our Chamber of Commerce does Dragon's Den, now called Meaford Dragons. But I think that is, you know, the hugest opportunity to attract and support businesses in this municipality. So perhaps for Eric, sorry, while you've got your pen going, another thought would be for you to explore that with the chamber, because we talk in this document about partnership opportunities with our Chamber of Commerce. And because I've always thought the municipality could consider a greater role, should the chamber be open to it, in this particular event, because it is it is amazing, the number of businesses that have been supported through Dragon's Den who are still operating and successful in this community. But it should, in my personal opinion, be one of the biggest things that we're known for is this particular event and the opportunity that we have to bring, attract and support businesses, because this does not happen in other communities. There's only one other, right? The Eagle's Nest. I think there's only one other that does an event of this nature. So I think there's just a huge opportunity for us to participate in growing that.
Evelyn?
I think following on that, we do a lot of good things in this community, but we don't tell anybody about it.
That's true.
I was thinking of you. But that's like, if you, even now, you could start with the stories and kind of put that on our website. We don't have that on our website, all those stories. You know, I mean, what a message to new businesses to see that on our economic development website on how this community supports businesses. And even though it's done by the chamber, we could do our links or where, you know, whoever, all the related things, but it's as much, well, I think for those who've been in the area of economic development, it's as much of marketing and telling people the great stories we have. You know, and I keep using this example over, way back when the deputy mayor pulled together some folks and we wanted to learn ourselves about, you know, how are other municipalities dealing with it. And we listened to one of them explain to us that most of their marketing material is now not about their city, but about the groups in the city and what they do and the businesses in the city and what they do. You don't see, but you see those stories all the time. And that was a major shift, but it's telling our story. And, you know, I know it's not a new theme, but I don't think we do it very well. So I think we have a lot of things we don't even have to invent because we've been doing it. And we're just not shouting it from the rooftops.
So ironically, you said that because, have you seen that? That was given to me yesterday at the sesquicentennial meeting. Penciling it in, 27 stories of success achieved by Grey Bruce newcomers. So all immigrants to our community, our area, who somebody put together this book that talks about their successes in the community. Evelyn has championed in the past at the last EDAC meetings about how our municipality should be championing success stories and talking about our successes. So this is just an example of some of the things that we could be doing to put Meaford in a more favorable light. Not that it's not, but we can also be invisible.
We're focusing on the business and the attraction of people wanting to grow their businesses that are here and attract new businesses. So
Right.
that's the focus rather than just tourism or other reasons that we need communication.
Storm's brewing, sorry. I know we're down to 10 minutes and Alex is already looking at me like, you did tell me 3:30, 2:30. So I just want to throw it open to committee inquiries and whether there are anyone has any inquiry. I know we've just spent an hour with inquiries of one form or another, but are there anything specific that the committee would like to know or clarification on or information about that staff could help with? Surely.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And going back to the early part of the meeting, and perhaps we don't need to. I'm just remembering that in prior committees, we actually signed a code of conduct, and I just didn't know if you wanted us to continue doing that, Alex, if you were going to provide those at the next meeting, perhaps, and we will provide those signatures.
Through the chair, yes, thank you for flagging that. I am aware that's been done in previous years, and I'm going to make sure that that's prepared for each committee to also sign because it is very important. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, point 10, communications. I don't believe we have any communications at this point, but I did, just for anyone that's listening out there, public, I just wanted to state the committee will consider correspondence received by members of the public during each meeting. To share your comments, thoughts, or concerns with members of the committee, the public can send an email to deputyclerk@meaford.ca. When emails are received to this email address, they will be compiled into a correspondence list, which is then distributed to committee members prior to the meeting. The cover sheet of this list will be included on each meeting agenda. The contents of the correspondence list are not included on the public agenda to protect the privacy and personal information of those residents who choose to send in their thoughts and comments. 8 minutes left. We're coming to the end of so I just wanted this one last opportunity for anyone to share concerns, share comments. Looking at none, I'm going to take that as positive. Kim, and Eric, I'll actually throw it to you as well from the staff perspective to see if you have anything you would like to add.
No additional comments, but again, just thank you so much. And I know that Eric is probably running from the room. I think Holly's a little bit more a weekend, so I think I got her connected, but yeah, I think you'll see that we'll be able to, kind of come forward with how we will continue to, not just impress and wow that we have someone, but that there's also things behind all of that. So, but yeah, we're very much committed to moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. We did have regrets from 2 members today. I should have said earlier. Unfortunately, they were away and could not attend. We look forward to them being able to participate in the next meeting. And if there's nothing else, I will call this meeting adjourned.